Hello, my name's Hannah Caulfield. I'm here for Honiton Nub News, and we are joined by John Timperley of the Liberal Democrat Party for the Honiton and Tiverton constituency. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me for the interview.
And if you could just explain to the readers a little bit about yourself and why you're here today representing.
Yeah, my name is John Timperley. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon. I've actually been qualified for 38 years. I was appointed as a consultant here 24 years ago, but I first came to Devon 34 years ago as a junior doctor in North Devon, and with that experience I always wanted to come back here. So in those days there wasn't run-through training in orthopaedics, so you had to go away and come back, and I went to London, to the Northwest, to the Midlands, but eventually got a consultant job here in 1994, and I've practiced as an orthopaedic surgeon since then, with specialising in hip surgery.
Very interesting. So you have a real inside knowledge of the NHS.
I do, and obviously I've seen many governments take over control of the NHS, and one of the things that's really driven me into politics is recognising the role that politicians make in moulding the way that works. So if you can imagine, in Margaret Thatcher's time was when the trusts came on and there was capital value to the land, and the market started, and it carried on in the Blair era. Of course, Tony Blair and his government put a lot more money in, and to their credit, they did clear the waiting list, so it came down to 18 weeks, but at massive cost. And they did it by setting up independent sector treatment centres, almost outside the NHS. They flew in foreign surgeons to change the operating list, and they spent money on PFI bills, which have been massively expensive and have left a legacy for many years for people to pay back. And so they wasted huge sums of money, although, as I say, they did clear the waiting list. And then we have this current government where my waiting list has gone from 18 weeks to over a year, and really there's been less investment. There's a lot of lip service saying that they've kept up with investment, but there may be more going in each year, but it's not a real value of what it's costing with the demographics of our country and the cost of healthcare. So now if you look over Europe, we're spending at the bottom end of what is the average GDP in Europe and the Western countries. We're about, depends how you measure, but about 8% of GDP on healthcare. The United States spends double that and has a worse system without universal coverage, as you will know. So we need to put much more money in, and of course the Liberal Democrats have always been strong supporters. In fact, Beveridge was the one who really started the concept of the National Health Service, and our policy is to put a penny on the pound, which seems to be very popular with people, to put the money back in that is required to sort out the problems that we're presently having. And if you look at all the data that's coming, the waiting lists have gone through the roof. There are problems in accident and emergency with not hitting the targets of people being seen within 4 hours, and there are people waiting in corridors trying to find beds. The cancer targets are not being being missed, and there are a large number of scans of MRIs and CTs waiting to be reported because of the problem. So we need massive investment.
And you believe Liberal Democrats have the right sort of strategy to help the NHS and to sort of bring it back?
I do, because I think they're willing to say that actually this is going to cost money, and there's been a lot of dishonesty by parties over the years pretending you can do all of this without people actually paying. And you pay for the quality of the service that you get in society, and there's that American politicians who says, you know, taxes are what we pay for a civilized society, and there's some truth in that if you want good health and social care, then it costs money. And I think one of the things that people find attractive is this is a hypothecated sum of money that is going to health and social care. And we're also, as a party, quite collaborative. So if you look at the problems in many sectors, healthcare as much as any others, you need the parties to collaborate to give a long-term plan. You can't do it within a period of 5 years of a government, and you actually need the brightest and best from each party to collaborate to give the solutions of these things. And so what we would like to see is a cross-party collaboration to continue the work that is being done in a rather ad hoc basis of joining up the NHS and social care. We know that a lot of money has been taken by this government out of social care. A lot more money needs to go back into that, and really join up the health and care of people from birth really until death and end of life. The way that is financed is clearly extremely important as well, and it hasn't been addressed. So
yeah, what would you say to people living in Honiton specifically why they should vote for you?
Well, the Liberal Democrat Party is a very non-central party, so we believe in devolving power from the centre, from Westminster to the regions, and believing in putting money into local government to drive local government, and that the local people know best how to invest their money. So if we look at the problem of climate change, which is an emergency, it is a climate emergency, we have very strong policies to invest and to give people power locally to address the problems, as well as looking at the large picture of how as a nation we go forward, because it will profoundly change the society we live in and how we live our lives and the value that we put to certain parts of our lives.
Absolutely. So what specifically would you do to bring be carbon neutral by 2030, which is what's being looked at? How specifically?
Well, specifically, things like if we look at building, that all new builds will be up to passive house standards by 2025. So we're going to a carbon neutrality and then passive house standards. They'll all should have solar panels on them. I think we need to go quickly to electric power for vehicles, so we need to invest in power points everywhere. And that will change, as we were discussing earlier, the nature of the community, and that we won't probably need all the garages and mechanics that we currently have, and the petrol stations. There is going to be a change in the fabric of the way we live our lives, and there is something called the Just Transition Fund, where the Liberal Democrats are going to put money into the areas that are more profoundly affected by the changes that need to take place to address the climate change emergency.
Okay.
And we have very strong on small businesses. So we'll have a British business bank, but we're looking for hubs to work and collaborate in various areas with expertise. And there will be small business banks that will give small and medium businesses funding to make the investments that are required.
Okay, and obviously a big topic has been for the last 3 years is Brexit, after the referendum and the vote to leave. Liberal Democrats obviously will take that completely off the table.
Yes, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Brexit, because that's the reason I'm standing as a Member of Parliament, actually, because I feel passionately how badly misled the country has been. If you think back to 2012 to the Olympics, there was that pride of national pleasure of how well we were doing as a country. And nobody was really talking about Europe. The people talking about Europe was the right-wing press and the Conservative Party. And then suddenly you have a referendum to address an internal problem in the Conservative Party, no more no less. It had not been thought through at any level. If you look at the Scottish referendum, when they had a referendum, there was a 250-page white paper about what the effects of that might be, whether they stayed in or they left. There was no work done on the EU referendum, none. And that is the reason they couldn't trigger Article 50 straight away, because nobody had made any preparation for it. How ludicrous a situation is that? And if you look at all the mature democracies in the world, none of them change their constitutions without a supermajority. So, for instance, in the United States, you need not only, I think it's 2/3, 60% of the states to agree that there should be a change in the constitution, but in the House of Representatives, there also has to be a supermajority of that sort of figure to make that change. Here, so little thought had gone into the referendum that a simple 52-48 was enough to trigger this massive change in the way we live our lives. And I think we now know much more than we knew then. And it's a disgrace, frankly, that we're not having another referendum to give a confirmatory vote. And if you look at the conduct of this government, first of all, Theresa May had to be taken to the Supreme Court because she did not want to give Parliament a vote on her deal that she was going to put forward. They allowed as little scrutiny as possible about her deal before coming back at the very end, before the deal had to be done. And then we go on to the Conservatives failing to pass their own legislation. They blamed Labour and everybody else, but actually it was the ERG internally that failed to pass that legislation. So what do then? They prorogue Parliament, and illegally, as it turns out, so Parliament was brought back. And then finally, when they do get the first reading passed, they call a general election because they don't feel they have sufficient power. And what really has made me stand is that this is a really dangerous time for our country. And I think Michael Heseltine is absolutely right that this is the most important election since the Second World War, because our lives will change if there is a majority of the Conservative government. and it'll change for the worst.
What would you say to people who would argue that we had a vote and people voted to leave and that should be respected?
Well, as I explained, it wasn't well thought out. The whole question was not thought out. We did not know what leaving meant. The government didn't know. In fact, they still don't know. They're still negotiating. So we didn't know what it meant. There was no supermajority, which you shouldn't have for a constitutional change. We were repeatedly lied to, and even when the lies were pointed out, that repetition of lies went on. There's proven money coming in from abroad, which is illegal, and there was foreign interference. And I point you to this book, which was published 2 days ago, Crime in Progress, The Secret History of the Trump-Russia Investigation, in which Brexit is mentioned several times. And there is a report looking at Russian interference in Western democracy generally, and there's no doubt that the Russians have been interfering and almost certainly were involved in interfering with the EU referendum. So for all those reasons, I personally think that that vote was invalid, but it was a vote that was undertaken. Given all those things, why would you not now the negotiation has gone forward, check that that's what the people want? There must be something really sinister happening, or that the people must know that there's something bad happening for that not to go back to the people again. My message is you must not allow the Conservatives to get a majority government. You should vote tactically to stop the majority government in order that we can go back to the people, present them with what has been negotiated by the government that they elected to negotiate the Brexit deal, put that back to them against remaining as we are, and then we can draw a line under it democratically and say either we leave and we know the deal, or we remain and then we try and take back our rightful position in Europe, contributing and in many ways leading Europe and being a strong and influential power in the world. If we leave, I can absolutely guarantee you we will be diminished in almost every way, socially, economically, our influence in the world in 10 years' time, and eventually we will try and get back into Europe, because we need to be part of a large bloc, a bloc that is open, liberal, tolerant and democratic, to be a body against the other forces in the world at the moment, such as Trump's America or China or Russia, which we know is desperately trying to interfere with Western democratic systems.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today, John Timperley, and thank you everyone for watching, and please do like our Facebook page, Honiton Nug News.
Thank you.